What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about Jim Jones's life turned out to be untrue? All right, Mama Jones is finally speaking up, and the information she is disclosing is astounding. All right, so you've been wondering for years why Jim's life became so chaotic. What caused the betrayal? Why was everything in disarray? Prepare yourself, for Mama Jones just provided the answers, and I can assure you that you won't believe who is to blame. Did Jim's bad decisions truly lead to his downfall? Or were those closest to him secretly conspiring against him? Although Chrissy Cameron has always generated controversy, did they truly intend to undermine Jim's empire from within? Jones is summarizing everything, and her words are dynamite. What did Chrissy and Cameron do in private that led to Jim's public humiliation? What is the extent of the betrayal network? The reality is more sinister than anyone could have imagined. It's not about a few bad decisions. It's about a full-fledged conspiracy. Prepare to hear the untold tale. Jim Jones will no longer be the same to you. You won't believe how hard it will hit. Let's dissect this because what you're going to hear will upend all of your preconceived notions. Mama Jones has now spoken out about Jim Jones and others around him after years of witnessing the devastation. But it's not simply another family drama, I promise. We are dealing with a betrayal that is so profound and complex that it is nearly impossible to accept as true. Jim has been a contentious character for many years due to his public conflicts, contentious choices, and let's not forget his indisputable impact on the rap industry. But what actually occurred has always been the question. How did someone so strong and confident get into the situation he is in right now? When Jim's life collapses, Chrissy and Cameron are the names that always seem to come up. You might be asking what's new, but Mama Jones is at last telling the truth. You see, Jim's death has been shrouded in mystery for years. Relationship issues, career losses, and public humiliation were all too much to overlook. When Mama Jones connects the dots, she presents an ugly picture. Was Jim really so completely betrayed by Chrissy and Cameron that there was no turning back? According to Mama Jones, they did. The depth of this conspiracy, however, is far more horrifying. It encompasses power, control, and the extreme lengths that go beyond mere envy or misunderstandings. When they feel threatened, people will go there. We must pause to consider the years when Jim's empire was flourishing, and he had everything going for his music in order to properly appreciate the gravity of this revelation. Corporate allegiance. But after that, his life started to collapse in a way that seemed almost intentional. According to Mama Jones, she saw Jim's closest friends and trusted associates pulling the strings behind his back. Mama Jones's new disclosures depict a control-obsessed individual who wouldn't think twice about manipulating and destroying in order to achieve their goals. Then there's Cameron, a name that has, let's be honest, always carried a lot of weight in the streets as a significant character in the rap scene. Cameron established his own empire. However, Mama Jones asserts that Chrissy Lynn has always been a contentious figure in the public eye and has never been afraid to voice her opinions, particularly regarding Jim's friends and colleagues. The story is not just what has been reported. She asserts that Cameron's intentions were never as sincere as they appeared for years. He has been engaging in risky behavior, and his ultimate objective, well, let's just say that viewing these relationships as drama worthy of the tabloid wasn't Jim Jones's success. However, what if it goes beyond that? What if Jim was being pushed into self-destruction by the people he trusted the most? Mama Jones isn't talking about unimportant things anymore. She is exposing the reality of how Chrissy and Cameron deliberately took advantage of Jim's circumstances. And trust me, the more you know about it, the more amazing it gets. But first, let's grasp why this is so important before delving into the details of how they accomplished it. Jim Jones is not your typical celebrity. In the rap industry, it's a staple. A man who has influenced culture and is respected. And you can be sure that you will witness the pinnacle of treachery when someone close to him starts to work behind the scenes. It was also intimate. Chrissy, Cameron, and the members of his inner circle, whom he trusted with everything, were all on his side, according to Jim Jones. But Mama Jones's next revelation will completely change the way you think about these connections. She claimed that Cameron played a key role in igniting Jim and Chrissy's romance. Furthermore, it wasn't merely an issue of ego or drama. Instead, he was sowing doubt and instability in the background. What was his ultimate objective? Was he attempting to discredit Jim so he could start his own company? Or was there more going on here? How does Chrissy's part in all of this relate to the shocking revelation that Cameron was actually positioning himself to take Jim's place? According to Mama Jones' theory, Cameron's thirst for control and power led him to manipulate Chrissy. It was more than power, though. Chrissy was driven to make choices that would undermine Jim's foundation because she felt betrayed. By now, it's clear that this isn't just a friendship falling out or a straightforward love triangle. Instead, it's a well-planned plan that has been in place for many years. We start to see how deliberate and malevolent this betrayal was as we put the puzzle pieces together. Mama Jones wasn't merely standing by while her son's life collapsed. She was witnessing individuals Jim trusted ruin all he had worked so hard to achieve. How much longer will Jim watch helplessly? More significantly, what is the extent of this conspiracy? The harm was strategic as well as emotional. Every action taken by Chrissy and Cameron was a part of a bigger scheme to progressively demolish Jim's empire. It's a common misconception that people are aware of what goes on behind the scenes. They witness the beauty and glitz, but they are blind to the struggles that take place behind closed doors. Jim, Cameron, and Chrissy were all involved in an awful situation. It's time for the world to learn the truth. As she began to talk, a side of the narrative that had never been completely revealed, years of unsaid hurt, betrayal, and rage. Family issues were no longer the only ones. Was about trust, loyalty, and the terrible impact that one individual's choices may have on a whole community. Inhaling, preparing to plunge further into the web of betrayal, deceit, and manipulation that had torn Jim's life apart. Like brothers, Jim and Cameron had stood by each other through good times and bad. However, things shifted at some point, and Jim was left in the middle as Cameron grew aloof. Everything started to come apart at that time, Mommy. Jones hesitated for a second, a mixture of grief and incredulity on her face. Initially, I noticed everything taking place in tiny, inconspicuous fissures here and there. When Jim got home, he would tell me that things with Cameron were getting difficult and that they were no longer in agreement. Additionally, Chrissy would bring up the topic all the time as if she were attempting to strain their relationship. Jim and Cameron were no longer the only ones involved. It has to do with her authority and her perception of what ought to happen. As she continued to describe how Chrissy's manipulation progressively permeated Jim's relationships with everyone around him, the weight of her words struck hard. Unaware that she was destroying Jim in the process, Chrissy wanted him to be everything she wanted him to be. She didn't want him to return to his former self. Rather, she wanted him to be the man of her dreams. Those who actually loved him. Cameron is the first. Cameron. Mama Jones shook her head and mumbled. This wasn't how he always was. Once upon a time, he was a devoted friend, but devotion has its limits. Cameron didn't simply change when others began to. Rather, he started to regard Jim as a means of advancing in the game and securing his own place. It was like a perfect storm when Chrissy came along. They both started pulling Jim in various directions. Nobody ever paused to ask him what he wanted, even though they were all trying to mold him into their perfect selves. She remembered the times, and you could hear the pain in her voice. Jim was a completely different person when his life began to go out of hand. Furthermore, neither the music nor the business was to blame. Instead, it was due to the individuals he most trusted. He no longer recognized himself after Chrissy and Cameron had gradually taken everything from him. As she continued, Mama Jones wiped away a tear. The most painful thing was that Jim was blinded by his love for Chrissy and the friendship he thought he had with Cameron, so he didn't even see it coming. They were plotting behind his back, preparing him for failure while he was blind, and he was too caught up in the moment to notice it, post when it's happening. It was now clear that the betrayal involved more than a romantic relationship, even if they had manufactured an appearance. It concerned a long-standing friendship that had turned poisonous. Mama Jones detailed how Cameron's relationship with Jim worsened, how new betrayals emerged and old wounds were revived, and how Cameron started to physically and emotionally separate from Jim. She also explained how Chrissy was making every effort to put Jim at odds with his real buddies. She was in charge of the situation without Jim even recognizing it. The weight of the truth caused Mama Jones's voice to tremble a little. He was being tested, and no one was there to tell him the truth or show him what was actually going on behind the scenes, so he was the last to know when it all fell apart. I was unable to remain silent after witnessing everything take place in front of me. It was no longer just about Jim. It was about the harm that Cameron and Chrissy had caused to him, to us, and to everything we had created together. The turning point came when Mama Jones realized that Jim was not the same person she had known previously, not just because of the betrayal, but also because of his changing conduct. Jim was too competent, too devoted, and too genuine for these games. However, loyalty has the potential to be your greatest asset. However, if the wrong individuals take advantage of it, it may also be your downfall. I witnessed my son, the one I nurtured and loved, become someone I didn't recognize as he was losing himself in all the lies and manipulation. It was more than just the pressure of his celebrity and career. It was the individuals he had brought into his life. Individuals who were not motivated by his best interests. Mama Jones spoke steadily yet with great intensity. They were adept at exploiting Jim's devotion, love, and trust. Ultimately, Jim was the one who suffered the consequences. The betrayal became too much to handle as the days passed, and Mama Jones was aware that everyone affected by the falsehoods and deception needed to know the truth, not just Jim. I'm not taking this action to get notoriety or exact revenge. Jim needs to know the truth, and the public should know the real identities of Chrissy and Cameron, which is why I'm doing this. They thought they could kill him and get away with it. Family, however, was something they undervalued. She made it plain that she would no longer remain silent for Jim, her family, and herself, even if it was far from finished. At last, the truth would be revealed. It's too late. We need to talk about the chaos that followed Jim Jones's life when it collapsed due to betrayal now that we have unraveled the complex web of lies that Chrissy and Cameron had constructed. Wasn't merely a celebrity dispute or a public divorce. Instead, it was the fall of an empire Jim had built over many years. However, what happens if the individuals you trust end up bringing you to your demise? Ask Jim, that is. First, be aware of the consequences. Mama Jones claims that the emotional devastation hit Jim where it wounded him the most and wasn't just for show. Wayne's musical career had started, but it wasn't because of aging or shifting trends. Instead, it was the damage caused by his closest relatives and friends, who he thought supported him. Mama Jones claims that Chrissy and Cameron were working behind the scenes to ensure that Jim would lose his favor, and the outcome was catastrophic. As the entire scope of the betrayal began to surface, let's begin with the legal implications. It's not surprising that legal action starts when someone with such a high profile is targeted in this way. Mama Jones claims that, contrary to popular belief, Chrissy and Cameron made threats to sue Jim. It had nothing to do with personal slights or strained friendships. Instead, these cases were a part of a bigger plan to divert his attention while they sought control, drain him of his money, and entangle him in legal red tape. This is where things start to become very interesting, though. Jim considered filing a large case of his own at one point. Jim was hesitant to file a lawsuit because he still believed that Chrissy and Cameron may be saved in some way. The folks who had been closest to him were people he didn't want to believe the worst. However, Mama Jones does not have that privilege because she is a protective mother. She could see right through it, revealing the truth about the dubious activities he says Cameron and Chrissy engaged in. The lawsuit would have exposed the dirty laundry for everyone to see. What could have been more rewarding than witnessing Cameron, the ultimate manipulator, be made to respond to inquiries on his involvement in this entire situation? Jim Jones committed his greatest error. Hesitancy kills careers, as everyone knows. The financial crisis had already taken place by the time he understood what was really going on. Let's discuss the money, though. The financial cost is inevitable when someone ruins your connections and reputation after you've spent your entire life succeeding. Jim Jones lost both his personal connections and his financial situation. Mama Jones claims that Jim's poverty was the result of Cameron and Chrissy pulling strings behind the scenes. Chrissy and Cameron were discreetly setting up transactions that drained Jim of his riches while he was engrossed in the drama. Imagine finding that your pals have been emotionally depleting you when you are at the top of your game and earning millions. Jim experienced that. His business endeavors failed, his assets were liquidated, and his brand collapsed. It was more than just a drop in income. There was a crash, and the two individuals he thought he could rely on the most were accountable. But let's not hold back. According to Mama Jones, Jim's financial security was already in jeopardy when he realized that Chrissy and Cameron had been plotting his death for years. But the true monster was the public backlash because, as we've seen in numerous scandals, once the whispers start, there's no going back. The tiniest murmurs can become full-fledged wildfires thanks to social media. And boy, did it catch fire. The populace was split. While some backed Chrissy and Cameron, others backed Jim because they believed his entire career had been ruined. Everyone was blaming each other during the media frenzy. However, Mama Jones admits that in the public's perspective, Chrissy and Cameron were anything but innocent. In addition to being the story's victims, they were also involved in this larger-than-life drama, creating their own narrative and feeding the media machine misleading material to ensure Jim bore the majority of the blame. Even more startling is how rapidly public opinion shifted, with people starting to doubt Jim's every action. Did he deserve the criticism? Did he cause this, or was he the victim? Implied that Jim was being presented as a failure, who was unable to balance his personal and professional lives. Mama Jones, however, won't let that continue. She maintains that Jim was the victim of a calculated effort to damage his reputation rather than just a personal betrayal. The final blow comes when Mama Jones admits that Chrissy and Cameron's egos weren't the only thing causing the mayhem. It has to do with control. You see, their motivations went beyond simply wanting Jim to fail. They desired to take his position. They were driven by a desire to demolish what Jim had created in order to emerge from the ashes. The most depressing reality of all is that the question remains unanswered despite everything we have learned. What does Jim Jones stand to gain from this? Is there any chance that he will rebuild from the rubble that Cameron and Chrissy left behind? Or is it too late to make a reappearance? Mama Jones will assist him in pulling the strings, but she has said it how it is. In the end, Jim's life was destroyed by a well-thought-out scheme by those who profess to love him the most, not by a chance incident. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel if you understand the seriousness of this startling reality and want to be informed about every development in this controversy. There are some special details that you won't want to miss. And we're just getting started, so we'll definitely get started. Will it be sufficient to alter the story, or has the harm already been done? If you believe Jim's career is doomed or if he will rise from the ashes, let us know in the comments section below. Did Jim simply play into the hands of Chrissy and Cameron, or did they ruin his life? There will be more startling discoveries that you won't find anyplace else. In order to avoid missing the next shocking revelation, switch on your notifications. Remember, that's more than just rumors. It is about actual lives, actual betrayals, and actual repercussions. Tell us what you think, who you think is actually at fault, and who you think is the true mastermind behind this mayhem. No one ever keeps silent in the realm of controversy, so let's start a discussion in the comment box below. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and return often for the next startling revelation.